The first thing I noticed about Sam wasn't anything dramatic. It was just that he never let anyone finish restocking the poetry section without offering to help, even on his first day, even before he knew where anything went. Most new hires spend their first shift trying not to mess anything up. Sam spent his first shift memorizing the shelves like he needed the order of things to make sense before he could relax into the job at all. I manage a used bookstore that's been squeezed between a laundromat and a nail salon for going on 9 years, the kind of place that survives on regulars and stubbornness more than foot traffic. We'd needed a second part-timer for months, and Sam showed up for the interview in a jacket 2 sizes too big for him and answered every question with more care than the job really required, like he was worried about getting something wrong even in a conversation about shelving categories. He got the job, he was good at it, better than good, actually. He had this way of remembering which customers liked which authors, would set books aside without being asked, and would restock the register candy without anyone telling him it needed doing. Within 2 weeks he'd become the kind of employee you stop worrying about, the kind who just handles things. But there was something underneath all of it that I couldn't quite name, not for a long time. Little things. He never talked about his weekends on Monday mornings the way most people do, that easy small talk about what they watched or where they went. He'd ask about mine, genuinely interested, but redirect so smoothly when it came back around to him that I usually didn't notice until later, replaying the conversation, realizing I still knew almost nothing about his life outside those 4 walls. He left early every single Tuesday. Not by much, 20-30 minutes before his shift technically ended, and he never explained why, and I never asked because it wasn't really my business what he did with his time, and because something about the way he'd glance at the clock as Tuesday afternoons wore on told me it wasn't a topic he wanted opened. I want to be honest that I noticed him beyond just being curious about his schedule. He had this quiet, unshowy kind of handsome that crept up on you instead of announcing itself, the kind you don't clock right away and then can't stop clocking once you have. But it wasn't really that either, not at first. It was more that he felt like a closed book sitting in a store full of open ones, and something in me, some old instinct from years of working around stories, wanted to know what was written inside him. 3 months in, we started closing together most nights, the 2 of us doing the register count and the sweeping and the last coffee run of the day, falling into an easy rhythm that had nothing forced about it. We talked about books mostly, argued lightly about authors, developed the kind of shorthand that builds between 2 people who spend enough quiet hours in the same space. But every time the conversation drifted toward anything personal, family, relationships, the things people usually eventually share with someone they're growing close to, Sam would find a soft place to land it somewhere else, gentle but definite, like a door being closed without being slammed. I stopped pushing, mostly. I figured everyone's entitled to keep some rooms locked, especially in the early months of knowing someone. But it got harder to just accept as the months went on, and I found myself thinking about him at strange times, wondering what he was doing on his Tuesday half shifts, wondering why he flinched just barely, the one time a customer asked if he had a girlfriend, wondering why his eyes did something distant and far away whenever a certain song came on the store's ancient radio, a slow acoustic thing I never got around to identifying. It was late October when it finally cracked open, and not because I asked the right question at the right time. It was an accident, the kind of accident that only happens because you've let your guard down enough around someone to stop being careful. We were closing on a Tuesday, one of his early leave days, except this particular week he'd stayed the whole shift, which I noticed but didn't comment on. He was quieter than usual while we swept, distracted in a way that made me keep glancing over at him, and around 8 he sat down heavily on the little step stool we kept behind the register, as something had finally caught up to him. "You okay?" I asked. "Yeah, just a weird day." He rubbed a hand over his face. "It's the anniversary of something. I usually take the time off around now. I just didn't this year, and I don't know why I thought that would be fine." "Anniversary of what?" He didn't answer right away. He looked at the shelves instead, at nothing in particular, and I watched him decide something and watched the decision move visibly across his face, the way big decisions do sometimes, when a person's spent a long time keeping something folded small, and finally lets it unfold. 3 years ago today my boyfriend died, he said. Car accident. Nothing dramatic to explain, no big story, just a truck that ran a light on a Tuesday afternoon while he was driving home from work. I usually take the day, sit with it, and this year I told myself I didn't need to, that 3 years was long enough that I could just work through it like a normal day. I was wrong. I didn't say anything right away, because I didn't want to say the wrong thing in a moment that clearly mattered too much for careless words. I just sat down on the floor near the step stool, close enough that he'd know I wasn't going anywhere, and let the quiet do some of the work words couldn't. His name was Alex, Sam said after a while, quiet, like he was testing how the name felt out loud after not saying it in a while. We were together for 4 years. I moved here about 8 months after, because I couldn't keep living in the apartment we'd shared, couldn't keep walking past the restaurant where he proposed, and couldn't keep running into people who knew us as a pair and now just looked at me like half of something broken. That explains a lot, I said gently. The Tuesdays. That's the day it happened. I still can't be anywhere that feels normal on a Tuesday afternoon, even 3 years later. I usually just drive somewhere quiet and sit for a while. I don't even really do anything specific. I just need the day to feel different than a regular day, because it isn't a regular day, even when everyone else around me has no reason to know that. You never said anything, this whole time. It's not really an easy thing to bring up between ringing up paperbacks and restocking bookmarks. He gave a small, humorless laugh. And honestly, I liked that you didn't know. I liked being someone here who wasn't the guy whose boyfriend died. I got to just be Sam, who's good at organizing the poetry section. That mattered more to me than I expected it to, having one place where I wasn't defined by it. I understood that more than I think he expected me to, and I told him so. The specific relief of being somewhere your worst thing isn't the first thing people know about you, where you get to just be a person again instead of a walking tragedy other people tiptoe around. Can I ask you something? I said carefully, and you don't have to answer if it's too much for tonight. Go ahead. Do you think you'll ever want that again? Not asking for any particular reason, I just mean in general. Do you think that door's still open for you, or did it close with him? He was quiet for a long moment, turning the question over. I used to think it closed with him. For the first year, easily. I couldn't imagine wanting anyone else, couldn't imagine it feeling like anything other than betrayal, even though I know logically that's not how grief is supposed to work and that's not what he would have wanted for me. He looked at me then, really looked, in a way that made something in my chest go very still. Lately I've started to wonder if it's not actually closed. Just quiet, like it's been waiting for a reason to open again, instead of being sealed shut for good. Something about the way he said it, the way his eyes stayed on mine a beat longer than casual conversation usually allows, told me this wasn't just a general philosophical answer. It felt aimed at something. Aimed, maybe, at the two of us sitting on the floor of a closed bookstore at almost 9 at night, close enough that I could see the fine lines of exhaustion and old grief still etched around his eyes. I don't want to put anything on you tonight, I said. Today's clearly heavy enough without me making it about something else. You're not making it about something else. You asked a real question and I gave you a real answer. He managed a small smile, the first one I'd seen from him all evening. Honestly, it's been kind of a relief, saying all of it out loud. I've been carrying it alone here for 8 months, and it's exhausting, holding a whole invisible life next to the one people can see. We sat there a while longer, not really needing to keep talking, just letting the store's quiet settle around us. Eventually, I offered to drive him home instead of letting him take the bus like he usually did, and he accepted without the polite refusal I expected, which told me something about how tired he actually was, how much that one conversation had cost him. In the weeks that followed, something between us shifted, slow and carefully, the way things shift when both people involved understand exactly how fragile the ground is. He started staying later on Tuesdays without needing to leave early anymore, not because the grief was gone, but because, he told me once, having somewhere warm to be on that specific day of the week had started to matter more than being alone with it. He started telling me small things about Alex, unprompted little details that clearly still lived warmly in him, even through the grief. Alex's terrible taste in horror movies, the way he used to leave notes in Sam's coat pockets before work trips, and the ridiculous nickname he'd had for their downstairs neighbor's cat. I didn't rush anything. I want to be clear about that, because it would have been easy to treat that one vulnerable night like an invitation to something faster than either of us was ready for. Instead, we just kept closing the store together, kept talking, and kept building the same easy rhythm we'd had before, except now it had room in it for the truth, which changed the shape of everything even when nothing on the surface looked different. It was almost Christmas when he brought it up again, unprompted this time, no anniversary weighing on him, just an ordinary Thursday evening with the store empty and the radio playing something soft in the background. I've been thinking about what you asked me, he said out of nowhere, restocking a shelf that didn't really need restocking, about the door. Yeah. I think it's not just quiet anymore. I think it might actually be open. He turned to look at me, and there was something different in his face than the careful, guarded expression I'd gotten used to over the past few months, something more open, more willing to be seen. I think it's been opening this whole time slowly, actually, longer than I probably should admit, and I kept telling myself it was too soon, or too complicated, or that you probably didn't feel the same way and I'd rather keep things comfortable than risk it. My heart was doing something complicated in my chest, that specific mixture of hope and caution you feel when you've wanted something for a while without letting yourself fully admit it. And now I'm standing here telling you, because I spent 3 years thinking love only comes around once if you're lucky, and grieving like that was the whole rest of the story for me. And somewhere in the last few months, working next to you, closing up with you, and telling you things I hadn't told anyone else here, I started to wonder if maybe I just got lucky twice. If that's even something people are allowed to think. I think it's exactly something people are allowed to think, I said, my voice not quite steady. I've felt something building here for a while too. I just didn't want to be the reason you felt rushed into anything, not after everything you told me that night. You weren't rushing anything. If anything, you gave me room to get here on my own time, and I don't think I've ever had that from anyone before, someone who just let me exist without needing anything from me until I was ready to offer it. He set the book he'd been holding down on the shelf, not even looking at where it landed. I don't know exactly what this is supposed to look like going forward. I've never done this, falling for someone new after losing someone I thought I'd spend my whole life with. I don't have a map for it. Neither do I, but I don't think anyone really does. I think you just go slow, and you let the person you're with hold both things, what happened before and what's happening now, without asking them to choose between them. He nodded slowly, something settling in his face, some old weight easing without disappearing entirely, the way grief does when it starts sharing space instead of taking up the whole room. Can I tell you something that might sound strange? Go ahead. I think Alex would have liked you. That's not me being dramatic, or trying to make this into some bigger story than it is. I think about what he'd say sometimes, and I think he'd tell me I was an idiot for taking this long to say anything. I laughed quietly, warmly, something loosening in my own chest that I hadn't fully realized was tight until it wasn't anymore. Then I guess I should thank him for the nudge, even secondhand. We closed the store a little later than usual that night, in no particular hurry to end the conversation, and when I finally locked the door behind us and we stood together on the sidewalk in the cold December air, he reached over and took my hand, tentative at first, then steadier, like he was testing whether the ground would hold and finding slowly that it did. I think about that first day a lot now, Sam in his too big jacket, memorizing the shelves like his life depended on getting the order right. This quiet, careful person who felt different from everyone else who'd ever walked through that door, though I couldn't have told you why at the time. I know now. It wasn't a mystery for the sake of mystery. It was a person carrying something enormous, trying to figure out how to keep living a real life around the edges of it, looking, without fully admitting it even to himself, for somewhere safe enough to eventually set some of it down. We still close the store together most nights. Tuesdays look different now than they used to. He still takes the anniversary seriously and still needs the day to feel different than an ordinary one, and I've learned how to be present for that without trying to fix it, because some things aren't meant to be fixed, only carried alongside. But the rest of the week looks like something neither of us expected to find again, him especially, and every time I watch him rearrange the poetry section without being asked, I think about how something being different about a person doesn't always mean something to be afraid of. Sometimes it just means they're still in the middle of becoming who they're going to be next, and if you're patient and lucky, you might get to be there for the part where they finally arrive.